Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conservation Conversation with Chelsea. My name is Chelsea Partridge, and I'm the Supervisor for Brevard Soil and Water Conservation District Group 3. In this series, I talk to people involved in conservation, hear about their work, and learn from the experts about how we can get involved in conservation in the community and at home. Today, we welcome Holly Abeels, Florida Sea Grant Extension Agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension Office here in Brevard County. As an extension agent, she brings science-based information to the community in the areas of natural resources, sustainability, climate change, water quality, and conservation. Welcome, Holly.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today, Chelsea. I appreciate it.
I am so thrilled to have you here. So let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in conservation to begin with.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is in marine biology and environmental science. So I was one of those students who always knew she wanted to be a marine biologist. And of course, that's like a nebulous, what is it that you're going to do with your life? So I went to college for marine biology, and I was lucky enough after I graduated to work at the University of New Hampshire for several years. And that's where I'm from, New Hampshire. And then I decided I wanted to go to graduate school. So I actually looked at schools in Florida because there's such great work that's going on here. And I went to Florida Gulf Coast University and got my master's there in environmental science. And a lot of the work that I've done in the past has actually been in oyster reefs and oyster reef restoration and looking at the health of oyster reefs in our environment. So both in Florida and in New Hampshire, I did that as well. So I was graduating, and as graduates do, they look for work. And I was lucky enough to see my position that I'm in right now announced. And so I applied for this position as the Florida Sea Grant Extension Agent in Brevard County, and I was offered the job. So I've been here since January of 2010. So it seems like a really long time ago. And like Chelsea said, my job is to give science-based information to the community and to participants of my educational programs about a variety of topics. That could be about our natural resources. It could be about the marine environment. It could be about sustainability or climate change and resiliency. So anything that basically affects our local waterways, both our estuaries and our ocean, is where I'll be working.
That's really interesting. I'm really interested in all the areas you work in. So I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation that we have today. But before we get into all these topics, tell us a little bit exactly about the Florida Sea Grant. Tell us what Florida Sea Grant is and what is the UF IFAS Extension Office? Because I talk about extension all the time with people, and they're oftentimes like, what? And they haven't heard of that. So give us a little more about what those two entities are and what they do.
Yeah, great question, Chelsea. There's a joke, maybe not a joke, more like in the field of extension, kind of like, oh, extension is the best kept secret, and we don't want to be the best kept secret. And then also with Sea Grant Extension, a lot of times people say, oh yeah, when I talk to people, they think I said I'm a secret agent, because the words get mixed up. So glad you asked, because it can be really confusing as to what it is that extension does and how it came about. So extension is actually very old. So back in 2014, actually, we celebrated our 100th year anniversary. So extension came about basically because of agriculture. So extension's roots go back to agricultural clubs and societies, which kind of sprang up during or after the American Revolution in the early 1800s. So there were a lot of people getting into agriculture. There were a lot of farmers that were getting settled. And so there was a lot of work being done to basically help those farmers to get their best methods and ways to farm and to be successful. So there were a couple congressmen that decided that there should be some type of formal program to help farmers, give them this education. So that formal program is called Extension. It's actually under the Smith-Lever Act. So that formalized Extension back in 1914. And it established the U.S. Department of Agriculture's partnership with what we call land grant universities. So universities in every state, there is a land grant university. So that's the university that actually applies research and provides education. And when the Smith-Lever Act was formalized, it was on agriculture. But through those 100+ years, we knew that there were all types of other things that we could educate our local communities about. So we do more than just agriculture, of course. So, I work on coastal resource issues, but we also have 4-H. So if you've ever heard of 4-H, that's the youth program of Extension. We also have horticulture. So that's where we work with either local residents and homeowners or commercial people who might be coming to your yard to spray your yard, for pests or to help fertilize your yard or landscape. So we work in the horticulture realm. We also work in another larger category called family and consumer sciences. So this would be what the past home ec was previously called. So we work in the areas of nutrition, community development, child safety, all types of different areas within that kind of family, working within the family, all the things that you think about that you do with your family, cooking, eating, making sure your family is safe and healthy, those types of things. And then we also work in the area of natural resources. So there is Extension that works strictly on like maybe land natural resources, but we also have in areas where there are coastlines, coastal natural resources. So here in Florida, Extension is run through both the University of Florida and the Florida A&M University. And they both provide that extension service throughout Florida. So within the University of Florida, it's called the UF IPIS Extension. There's thousands of extension faculty members, scientists, educators, volunteers who provide this information within Florida. So Sea Grant is very similar in that there were a couple congressmen who were like, hey, it's great that we have the land grant system. Why don't we do the same thing with our coastal ecosystem and call it Sea Grant? So the National Sea Grant College Program was established in 1966, so we're a little bit younger. And it also does the same thing. So we're working to create and maintain a healthy coastal environment and economy. The Sea Grant program is under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it has 34 university-based programs in every coastal and Great Lakes state, plus Puerto Rico and Guam. So we have over 3,000 scientists, engineers, public outreach experts, educators, and students, that help to provide the understanding, the conservation and utilizing of America's, coastal resources. And so Florida Sea Grant is also under the University of Florida. That was established in 1976. And again, it's a statewide program within the university. We're working with, within University of Florida Extension and all the coastal counties around the state to provide that education.
So tell us more about the projects that you are specifically working on.
Yeah, I have a lot of projects. Thank you for asking. So we always have, Extension always has a lot of different things that we're doing. And of course, being in a coastal county, there's a lot of different issues and areas of work, within our coastal communities. So there's several different types of projects that I work on. I have a really great project that I'm working on right now with the city of Cape Canaveral. This is actually a multi-state project because both Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina are working on similar projects, within those other states. Within Florida, it's with the city of Cape Canaveral, and we're actually looking at better implementing green infrastructure within the community there. So the city also already has a great sustainability and resiliency plan, and they're really just trying to incorporate different types of practices where they can best be resilient and sustainable into the future. And so that project is looking a lot at flooding. So they have a lot of flooding issues in the city of Cape Canaveral, like most coastal communities. And so we're actually looking at how to incorporate or work within the city to potentially buy land, that's not developed right now, to turn those into kind of like stormwater recreation parks where we can hold, that water that would normally be flooded in the street and hold it into that kind of stormwater park for flood control, but also be an area for recreation. So there would be, either biking or walking trails, maybe some of those exercise machines, so it would be like a natural area that people can enjoy, and a place for people to go to relax or to walk around. And of course, it's, could be another kind of type of corridor going from the lagoon to the beach, for people to enjoy. So that project I'm really excited about. So I'm working with several organizations with that, both the Florida Sea Grant and also Stetson University, the East Central Florida Planning Council, and of course, the City of Cape Canaveral. I also work with the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council on a larger regional program called the Regional Resilience Collaborative. And so if you're in the or if you've been hearing about climate and resiliency within Florida, the Southeast Florida Climate Compact is like the oldest kind of organization on regionally working on climate and resiliency issues within Florida. So the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, which covers a lot of the Central Florida counties and Volusia and Brevard County on the coast, we worked regionally to create a regional resilience collaborative, which is basically just a way for all the different government organizations and municipalities within the region to work collaboratively on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, making sure our transportation is resilient to storms and flooding, looking at our natural areas that potentially we can conserve, different things like that. And we actually created a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the region. So we know where we can reduce, areas where we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and work towards a goal of reducing those over the next 10, 20, 15 years or more. That also leads into, helping to work with people within the community on how they can reduce potentially their greenhouse gas emissions, or even just be more sustainable. So I have several programs related to sustainability and resiliency for just anyone who's interested in learning about that. So I have helped co-create a program called the Climate Smart Floridians program. And that program is basically working with the local general public community member, anyone who's interested in just learning more about how they can incorporate sustainability practices into their everyday life and within their home, and help to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So there's all these little different things that we can do to be more sustainable that actually helps, our environment in general, but also helps in either mitigating or adapting to climate change and sea level rise. And then in a general, like natural resources type of education or environment, I also help run the Florida Marine, or the Florida Master Naturalist program here in Brevard County. So that's a statewide program where people can just learn about Florida's natural resources. So there's, I think, 9 current courses within that larger program. And myself and I have 3 other colleagues within the county help teach that program throughout the year. So we offer the 3 kind of core modules, we call them. So you learn about the coastal systems, the upland systems, and the freshwater systems, both within Florida and within the county. And then there's kind of a couple of more deep diving topics, things like coastal, I'm trying to blank. Give me one second. So we have things like wildlife monitoring, we have habitat evaluation, we have coastal, like living shoreline type of work. So there's all different types of things that you can learn a little bit more about within that program. And that's a really very popular program that's actually just celebrated 20 years last year. So it's been around for a long time.
Those are some really interesting projects, and I'd like to follow up on pretty much everything you've mentioned here. So I'll kind of go in order of what we talked about. You talked about green infrastructure and resiliency and planning that you're doing with Cape Canaveral and the East Central Florida Planning Council. It reminds me a lot of a park you're talking about, like DeSoto Park and Satellite Beach. But what are some other areas in Brevard that you think would benefit from this? Are there similar projects that you'd like to see happen in the county?
Yeah, we actually have, Brevard has worked very hard in the past probably 10 plus years on resiliency, especially flooding resilience. So Satellite Beach is actually a pillar of the state of working on this. So if you are a Satellite Beach resident, congrats on your government working really hard onto being more resilient. So they've actually led the way within Florida, and a lot of communities want to be like Satellite Beach. So where they've been thinking about flooding within their community, how they can be more resilient, they've actually have done several studies looking at where areas flood the most and how that's going to affect like important infrastructure, like their fire stations. They're actually going to be moving their fire stations, so that way it won't be in a flooded area. So that way, if flooding occurs, say during a hurricane, the fire trucks can actually get out and, go and help the community. City of Cocoa Beach also is doing a really great job. They actually just very recently, the council adopted a net zero emissions target for their municipal operations. So they're looking at their greenhouse gas emissions, and they're going to say they're going to be, as far as municipal operations, which they can control as a city, they'll be net zero in emissions, I think by 2050 is their goal. So there's lots of communities within Brevard County that are doing that. And if I would look at your city, or if you're an unincorporated Brevard County, look at county government and see what's going on. So if you're living in Titusville, Melbourne, Palm Bay, like all those communities have plans moving forward on either sustainability or resiliency. So, get involved within the community, talk to the local government officials and see what it is that's going on, and maybe how you potentially, can help in those efforts, whether it's providing education to others or just knowing what's going on. So when people have questions, you're knowledgeable and you can say, yes, my community is doing something. And if you're also telling them, yes, I want you to do that, it helps them to feel like, okay, there are community members who want us to be working on this. It's not just potentially staff who are like, yes, we should be doing this. Community members have to be vocal to say, yes, we want you to be working on resiliency and sustainability. So that helps as well.
You talk a lot about flooding, and I think that fire truck example is a great example, because a lot of times when we think about sea level rise and climate change and stuff like that, you don't always think about the infrastructure of an area or city planning and how those things are impacted by climate change. So I think that's a great example. So I just wanted to ask, is flooding the major challenge you think we're going to see in Brevard due to sea level rise and climate change? Or are there other challenges that Brevard is facing that we're planning for?
So yes, flooding is one we're actually seeing right now. So in many places in Florida, flooding is a factor. And it's a factor for us in Brevard County because we actually are seeing increased levels of sea level within our Indian River Lagoon before we're actually seeing them like along the Atlantic Ocean. So our water levels in the Indian River Lagoon have been rising, and when they do rise, and if we have large rain events, that water needs a place to go, and a lot of our stormwater outfalls go into the Indian River Lagoon. But if the water level is too high, then the water can't go through those stormwater outfalls and go into the lagoon. It actually backs up onto the street. And so that could affect a lot of different things, and can affect just where people are living, so streets where houses are and where people are. It could influence infrastructure like wastewater treatment plants. Those types of things are really, really important for us to function as a society, being able to get from one place to another, being able to have our wastewater go to a place where it can be stored or it can get off the streets, those types of things. So flooding is going to be the big issue that we're actually already facing, and communities are already working on to figure out where to put that water. So can that water go if it can't go into the Indian River Lagoon? It can go into stormwater ponds or to stormwater parks or into low-lying, natural areas where it can be held and eventually sink down into the aquifer. So there's lots of different solutions for that. And, Brevard is facing these things right now, especially, when we do have, just rain events where it just might rain 2 or 3 inches, in a couple hours, that can cause flooding. We also have a lot of work in the transportation realm. So looking at our roads and bridges and how resilient they are to things like flooding or storms. So a lot of work is being done in that realm as well. And so transportation, flooding are probably the 2 big issues that we have here in Brevard County that work is already being done.
I want to circle back on that same thread of climate change. You mentioned earlier some of the greenhouse gas emissions. You talked about the course on climate smart Floridians. I want to ask a couple questions regarding those. First, at the broader level, before we bring it down local to each person, what are the ways that we in Central Florida are trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions at a broad level?
Yeah, so broadly and regionally, transportation is a big source. So thinking about basically all the vehicles that are on the road. So and Orlando is doing great work in this. They're actually leading the region on looking at their municipal operations and, bringing in electric vehicles, for all of their for their use, within the community, within the city, but also looking at their buildings, how they can be more energy efficient, different types of things like that. So at the large scale kind of regional level, looking at the transportation is going to be the big one. Where can you get electric vehicles? Where can you install, charging stations? So to encourage more people to purchase electric vehicles, where can you make electric vehicles more accessible for people, have them at dealerships and have people get in and test drive. I mean, I actually test drove a Chevy Bolt last year and I really wanted to buy one. So almost did, but then they recalled them. So don't let that deter you. But, there's many companies that are going the electric vehicle route. So that is going to be a bigger push for those types of things. And if cities can show that, yes, we want to purchase those, or we want to have them incorporated into our city, we want to provide charging stations, that's going to just allow the community to say, oh, okay, I can buy that electric car because there's more places for me to charge it. They don't have to think about, one of the reasons why people don't buy electric cars is because they're afraid that they're going to try to get to a destination and they don't have any place to charge. So by providing more charging stations, it allows people to feel more comfortable about that. So that's going to be probably the biggest push is transportation within our region. And that is going to be the biggest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
So let's bring that down to the individual level. You mentioned climate smart Floridians for everyday people to learn about climate change and what they can do. So how can people take this course? What are the details there?
Yeah, so they can take the course through their extension office. And so if you're in Brevard County, I will be offering the course sometime in the future, so they can let me know that they're interested, and I usually have like an interest list of people who are interested. So that way, when I offer the course, I can let you know and to register. And, as far as what people can do, it's very similar to things that you would normally do to reduce your costs within the home. So, putting in LED lights so that they last longer, uses less electricity, thinking about where you're using electricity within your home and how you can reduce that, how much you're using water. So, have you ever looked at your water bill to see how much water you use every month? How can you reduce that if the largest basically source of water use for most homes is actually outside your house with irrigation. So if you're irrigating your lawn with potable water, which is how most people irrigate their lawn, how is that affecting your water use? Are you really using a lot of water just to irrigate your lawn? So looking at things like that, looking at just ways that you can reduce what it is that you're bringing into your home, whether that's the food that you buy at the grocery store or the item that you have to have on Amazon. It's so tempting, right? To just open the Amazon app and be like, I need that and I need it by tomorrow. It's just so tempting. So, but really thinking about what it is that you're purchasing. Do you really need that item? Is there a way to buy it at a thrift store, consignment store, or there's a lot of those types of community groups where they say, borrowing a tool. So if you need a tool to do something within your home, there's kind of like some of those things like popping up where communities you can borrow tools from other community members. So those types of things are really just a way to help each other instead of having to, go out and buy something. So just think about what you're using every day within your life and how to either reduce that, whether it's reducing water or energy, or if you really do need that item, is that something that you actually really need? Is there another way to get it that's where you're reusing it or repurposing it or buying from a friend or something like that?
There was one other project you mentioned that I want to follow up on. You talked about the Florida Naturalist program, and I think you said it's been around for 20 years, and it sounds really interesting. How can people get involved with that?
Yeah, that's a statewide program. So you can take any of those classes within the Florida Master Naturalist program anywhere in the state. We actually sort of pivoted, during COVID when a lot of things were going online, to offering those classes virtually. So they used to be all in person. You would go in person, you would, get the classroom, PowerPoint, lecture, education. And then with those classes, often every time, basically, you take one of those courses, you're going out in the field and learning like hands-on about the different things you're learning in the classroom. So whether it's identifying plants, within an upland system, or looking at organisms, seining at the beach, all those different things you're going to learn in that class. And so you get that kind of hands-on activities as well as the classroom. So we did pivot to doing that online, which is a little hard, especially with the field trips, but that allowed people to kind of see what it was available within their own community that they could go check out even on their own. So now you could do it online, you could do a hybrid where you might only do the classroom education via computer and then actually meet up to do field trips, or completely in person. So there's lots of different options. And I like to let people know that because some people really like the hybrid or the online. Some people really want the in-person. So there's, lots of different ways, and that also that means you can take the course anywhere in the state. So if you live in Brevard County, we would love for you to come into our Brevard County course. We are offering them in person. So we just finished up a freshwater systems class, and we have a coastal systems class that starts the end of March, March 26th, I believe. And they'll be offered on Saturdays for those that work. So if you work during the week and you have your Saturdays available, you can take that course. And we try to offer the 3 core courses, so our freshwater, our coastal, and uplands, once a year. And then there is a bunch of special topics. So ones that kind of delve a little bit deeper into certain topics. And we offer probably like 3 or 4 of those a year. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved in those classes. You can take any course at any time in any order. So it doesn't, There's not like a prerequisite where you have to take one course before taking any others. Basically, it's whatever fits within your schedule. And you really learn more about Florida and Florida's natural resources, and kind of get a better appreciation about what's going on in the environment around you.
I think all of these courses are really cool, so you might as well just plan on having me on your interest list for everything. I'll have to find a way to clone myself in the meantime so I can participate in all of these cool programs. So this is great. And talking about these programs, I do know that you have a really cool volunteer program related to horseshoe crabs that I think is really neat. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how people can get involved with horseshoe crabs?
Yeah, so we in Brevard are part of the Florida Horseshoe Crab Watch program. So it's actually a community science or citizen science program where volunteers go out this time of year to survey and count horseshoe crabs that are actually coming up on the beaches to spawn. They lay their eggs and then go back in the water. That's probably the only time you would see a horseshoe crab, if it was coming up on the beach, to lay their eggs. And this program started actually on the Gulf Coast in the Cedar Key area back in 2015, I believe. And it was sort of a pilot to see whether or not the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, which actually has to manage the population of horseshoe crabs here in Florida, whether they could use volunteers, assistant scientists, to collect data that they actually need to kind of send to the national level of how horseshoe crabs are doing. And it worked. So we already know that citizen science programs are very successful in providing data that's used for natural resources management or management of species. And so it turned into a very successful program. And back in 2018, I wanted to bring the program here to Brevard County because I knew that we had horseshoe crabs here. There's a way you can actually report sightings of them through the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's website. So if you just Google FWC horseshoe crab, you'll actually find a way to report sightings. So when you see them, so that lets us know basically where in the state we're seeing horseshoe crabs. So I knew that because of that, we had horseshoe crabs here in Brevard County. I went to the training to learn how to bring the program here to Brevard. And in early 2019, we offered the training locally for volunteers to come and learn about the program and to start doing these surveys. So in Brevard County, we do the surveys in February, March, and April. Horseshoe crabs come up on the beach to spawn and lay their eggs near the new and full moon. So they like basically the highest tide when the water is the highest on the beach in order to lay their eggs. So it's very easy to determine basically when horseshoe crabs are going to be coming on the beach, to be laying their eggs. So it's something you can kind of count on because of when high tide is and around the new and full moon. Except in Brevard County and the Indian River Lagoon. We actually are we don't have tides. So I don't know if you ever noticed when you're out in the water in the lagoon, the water level doesn't change like every day, like it normally would in areas where there are tides. We are a microtidal system and our water levels are based on wind and basically the time of year. So water, when there's more rain, we have more water in the Indian River Lagoon and the water levels are higher. When there's less rain, the water levels are lower. So we actually determined the first year, so in 2019, when we started this program, that horseshoe crabs in the Indian River Lagoon in our area actually come up on the beach to spawn during high wind events, when the wind is blowing water basically onshore. So it's pushing the water up onto the beach. And that's when the horseshoe crabs are coming to nest. And that first year, the 2019 February, March, and April timeframe is when we learned that. And we have been doing this program 2020. It got kind of cut short because of the pandemic, but 2021, now we're in the middle of 2022 doing it, and we're still seeing, that horseshoe crabs, come up on our beaches during high wind events, pushing that water on shore. So that's something that we didn't necessarily have documented in a strategic way where we actually had people going to the beaches during this time to see that. We're also lucky in Brevard in that we have the highest population of horseshoe crabs coming on shore to nest than any other place in the state. So it's really important for us to keep monitoring their population during these times when they're coming on the beach to lay their eggs. So that way we can see how the population is doing, over time. We want to be able to say, from year to year, how many horseshoe crabs are we seeing? How often are they coming on the beach? And because we have such a high population, we'll be able to see, over time how well the population is doing, if it's increasing or decreasing. And because of that, the volunteers, I have wonderful volunteers. Obviously, I couldn't do this program without them. And they are so ecstatic about horseshoe crabs and doing this program. So if you ever have an interest in invertebrates like the horseshoe crab, please let me know and I can get you engaged in this program. It's really a lot of fun, and you see a lot of horseshoe crabs when you do this in Brevard County.
I have to say this program sounds like so much fun, and it's so cool that you're able to collect this meaningful data and find out that these horseshoe crabs are responding during the wind events, and sorry about my dog, and that we have such large populations here in Brevard, the biggest in the state. I think that's super neat. And so I applaud you for putting that program together. And I definitely encourage people to get involved if they're interested in that kind of thing. We're near the end of our time here together though, but do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with those tuning in?
I always encourage people to get involved in their community. Look at, now that you know more about extension, and at least the things that I'm doing, we have a lot of other wonderful programs within extension. So, please, I can get you on our newsletter if you'd like to just know what it is that we're doing and what's going on. And, just as far as, sustainability and resiliency and, things that you can do within your community, just look for the things that you're able to do personally. Don't think necessarily what everyone else is doing. To say this is something that I can do. This is how I can contribute to helping our natural resources and our environment, and just learn what's going on within your community. It's always great to be engaged and at least just be knowledgeable of what is happening. So you can either provide support or, ask questions as to, hey, why can't we do this? I hear that Orlando is doing this. It would be great to do this here. Just become knowledgeable, look at resources like Extension and other organizations that are providing great information, and, just see what you can do and what your community can do to be sustainable, resilient, and to conserve our wonderful natural resources that we have here in Brevard County.
Thank you so much, Holly, for those lasting words. I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for joining us today and talking about all the awesome things going on at Sea Grant here in Brevard. I first heard about Sea Grant a few years ago, and I've known about IFAS for a while, but I just love hearing more about the work that folks like you are doing here locally. So truly, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today, Chelsea. I really do appreciate it. And it was great talking with you.
And thanks to everyone who has joined us. If you have any topics that you'd like to hear about or people that you'd like to hear from, please let me know in the comments. Once again, I'm Chelsea Partridge, Supervisor for Brevard Soil and Water Conservation District Group 3. And thanks for joining me for Conservation Conversations with Chelsea.